Is this going to be good if I have this situation? People want to know if this is going to be for them. So your content needs to go through that same lens and framing of, will somebody be able to say, oh yeah, this is absolutely designed for me?
Hi, this is Christina Eve with Shine Strong, Live Long. Welcome if it's your first time here. Welcome back if you're a returning viewer or listener to the podcast or the radio show. I am so excited about today because I have brought in an expert, a very special guest. Her name is Danielle, and she is a messaging strategist, and she is here to talk to us about easy ways for us to create organic social media strategies that reach the right people. So if you are an entrepreneur, someone who is a coach, or you are someone who is heading up a ministry or doing something that God assigned for you to do, but you need help with your marketing strategy, look no further. She is going to be here with all things marketing coming up right after this. Welcome to Shine Strong, Live Long, where you'll find inspiration for personal and spiritual development for you and I to become who we were designed to be with intentionality.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Danielle R. Harris, and I'm a marketing expert, and I help business owners really get clear on their story and their marketing so that they can grow their business and get the clients that they want. I do this a lot by helping my people do a couple things. Number one, getting clear on their story of why they are uniquely qualified to help people do what they need to do. Number two, by getting clear on who are the people that you want to serve so that you're getting so specific so that when people see or read or hear anything about you, they're thinking, yes, this is the exact right thing. It was designed exactly for me. And then lastly, being clear on how you communicate, how you bring exact value, how your product is different than other people out there. So combining all of those elements into your marketing so that you can have the growing, thriving business that you really want.
Yes, all of that. All of that is super valuable. And the way that you're able to kind of say it so it sounds easy, right? But
Mhm.
for me and for some of the people that I work with, it's not always the easiest thing to start off. So that's where we are going to hopefully help them with some strategies today, because I brought in the expert. You know what I'm saying? So let's talk about social media marketing. So I know that there's two different types. There's paid and then there's organic marketing.
Mhm.
And I know, of course, paid is like when you pay for advertisement, but is there a way that they can work together? Or like which one do you think is best to have first?
Mm. So there are a lot of people. I've worked with people who they are experts in the paid area, and they will say that no, you want to figure out your marketing. Well, you can just go and you can pay, and then you can see like what's getting the most reach in those things, and using that to validate your messaging. That is absolutely a method that you can do. And if you have the dollars to be able to go and spend to verify and validate your messaging and positioning, I say have at it. I'm not one to say like, yeah, have to do something one particular way versus another. I know as someone who's been in the marketing field for over a decade that there are so many things and so many strategies that work. I primarily do organic because that is a way for you to not have to spend money in order to do this. A lot of times people either have lots of time or lots of money. And so if you have lots of money, you can go and spend all that. If you don't have the money, but you can dedicate some time to getting clear on your messaging, positioning, what's going to work in organic, then I say go and do that. Take that route. I do know that they can work together. There are people that do an organic base, and really with organic, it's people who are within your sphere of influence that you already have a connection with. And when you get paid, you're getting people that you probably ordinarily would have never reached and never seen. So when you work with that together, a lot of people, they might not necessarily, unless you have retargeting and all these other areas all set up, they might not necessarily see your ads that pop up. But your organic marketing, the things that you do, they will see that. So they can work together. It's not a one versus the other. It's just what is the strategy that's going to make the most sense for you and your business and where you're at. So I don't think of it as a versus. It's just more of a what's going to make the most sense for you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree with that. So I let you know before, like I come from the paid marketing side, and a lot of the times paid ads always work better when you have an organic strategy in place.
Mhm.
But also, so that what you said had me think of a different question. And just, whatever your thoughts are about this.
Yeah.
How do you feel about aesthetics? Because when I spoke with another coach, and she was just saying that your Instagram is kind of like your storefront. So, how important do you think like aesthetics are, like the color coding, all of that for Instagram?
Mm. So there's a couple things. I think when people hear aesthetics and then they automatically think, okay, I have to have these perfectly curated, the exact background needs to be together thing in order for anything to work on social media. It
Mhm.
does need to look together and polished and cohesive, but not necessarily to the degree that you think it does. It's not this perfection looking thing. It's more along the lines of if you look at the page, does it look like all of these things belong together?
Mm,
If
mm,
that if it looks like, "Oh, yeah, like these kind of go in the same hue family," like, "Oh, yeah, I can kind of recognize that that looks like Danielle's because, my brand colors are blue." So if there's something in, like, a particular hue, shade of blue, then you're like, "Oh, yeah, it's probably Danielle's because that belongs to her." Will I say that it's, like, the most, like, photoshopped, like, the most perfectly designed, expertly curated thing ever? No. But at the same time, someone could be able to look at that and say like, "Oh, yeah, that's totally Danielle's." So from the aesthetic point of view, I don't want people to get scared and say like, "Oh my gosh, and I have to go like work with a designer and I have to go do this brand photo shoot and I have to do this simply to post." That is not the case. It's more of a does this look like it belongs together? Are you using like all pinks one day and then now you're using all greens and now you're using all grays? And those aren't even the colors that you use. When I think of aesthetics and the way that it looks on your storefront, just does it look messy and crazy or does it look like, oh yeah, that totally works together. It totally goes together.
thanks. No, that's super helpful too, because that does take some of the pressure off of us out here that are perfectionists, trying to make sure everything looks super, super aligned with exactly what we think our brand colors are. So let's go into something that you're really good at and something that stood out to me when I was looking at your social media page. Let's talk about organic strategies that are sustainable and realistic.
Yes. And I think a lot of times when people are thinking, okay, have this business, I want to get growing. I need to show up and post something 5 days a week, every week, and not burn out. And when my people come to me, the first thing they ask, like, what should I be doing? And if you can show up 5 days a week and not burn out and always come up with ideas and plan in advance and have like this good system going, then I encourage you to do that. But most of the people that I work with, right out the gate, that is not something that they can do. Like that's a muscle that has to be exercised and worked at. And so I would rather you show up 2 to 3 times a week regularly on an ongoing basis and then scale up than to start off saying like I'm going to go hard for a good 3, maybe 4 weeks and then get so tired and frustrated that you're just like, "Oh my gosh, I'm already struggling. I'm already behind on things." And then not show up for 2 months because that was so irritating and frustrating for you to show up in that way. That's how I like to think about it as a baseline. So if you want any recommendations on those lines, like that's kind of where I start. Like, what is your capacity? Everyone's capacity is going to be different. Some people are just like, oh, I can easily do 3 to 4 times a week. Then go and do that if you can do that on a sustainable basis. If you're just like, look, I'm lucky to show up once a week, then try to do that consistently. Scale up. Of course, you are going to get more results the more frequently you show up when people know that they can expect something in particular from you on certain particular days. Yes, all of that is true, but I want you to one, make sure that you're first showing up, and second, that the quality of the things that you do post is there. Without that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I don't what I don't want anyone to do is to go and post a couple things and then don't show up again for weeks and weeks at a time.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of that. I actually, yeah, I tried a lot of different things to help me be more sustainable, like habit stacking. I was like, okay, if I'm in the gym, then I'm going to post before I leave the gym, and my legs are going to get tired, so I better hurry up and post something. And it just fell through the cracks. It's been like a month. So, but I'm getting better. I've been consistent on YouTube, but
Yeah.
Instagram is where I'm trying to get better at. So, cool.
Well, yeah,
No,
well, that's actually another thing though, like just to piggyback on that,
yeah,
is usually people are trying to do a whole bunch of different platforms at once. And if you're consistent at your one platform, a way to make sure that you're showing up in a sustainable manner is seeing like, okay, if I'm already, say, outlining something for a podcast episode and I'm recording it and I use video to record this, how can I work smarter and not harder and use that video and turn it into a reel and
yeah,
then use it the script that I already put together, how can I use that and rework it into a caption, and how can I also use that same thing and use that to make it into a carousel post? Like that's a more sustainable strategy, but at the same time it's just like, how can you make sure that you're just showing up on your one platform? Because I don't want you to then say, okay, I did all of this, then you don't ever actually end up posting the podcast episode or the YouTube video because you're like so busy trying to come up with all these other things. Like be regular and consistent at your main thing. And then when you have the expanded capacity and ability, start using what you've already worked on and what you've already built up the habit of doing and use that as the foundation to go into other platforms and in other ways.
yeah. That is helpful. Wow, you really do make this seem a lot easier than what what people think, really. Because it just sounds like you start where you can and scale to where you want to be, right?
Mhm.
And what I really love about, I guess, some of the things that you've been saying online is that you talk about telling our story and how our story is something that can lead us to that next lead for our business or that next client. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah. So a lot of times, especially people who I work with, a lot of coaches, online service providers, they have these fantastic stories and experiences of what they've done, either themselves in their lives or how they've helped other people. And they don't necessarily tell that in their marketing. They talk about, oh, like I can help you do this, or you meet with me X amount of times and we have a boxer call and all of these other things, but they don't talk about themselves, how they've been able to get wins for themselves. I'm thinking of one client in particular about how she didn't think that her background as an engineer was going to be relevant for her business as a money coach. She's like, there, it doesn't compute, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And as we were talking, she was like, well, I was like, does that make sense to you? And she said, it makes absolute sense because it's numbers and I'm a numbers girl. I'm just
Yeah.
like, so tell the people that you're a numbers girly and that you're
Oh,
just like the numbers are going to number, whether it's an equation in engineering over here, or if it's like numbers for your money, like the numbers are going to number and I make it make sense. Like that is my gift. And so understanding and seeing that like we have this very logical minded, engineering minded person helping you with numbers in a relatable way. Cause like she can figure out all of the things, but her approach to it was very natural. Her seeing other people seeing that, she's like, oh yeah, okay. She's a smart person figuring all of these other things out. Like that was appealing for people. And her passion for numbers was just infectious. And so other people are just like, I hate numbers. I don't want to look at that. But looking at her talk about that, like that passion that she has was so infectious, but that wouldn't have happened if she wasn't going to talk about her story. It wasn't going to come through if she just talked about money, debt, numbers. Like she needed to talk about the full experience to get that whole ambiance in for people to then be on board with her. And so that's where I like to think about like your story is so important, whether it's, as a business owner, you decided like, oh, I wanted to take this big leap, or, people always say that when, they're hearing stories of people that are, survivors of whether it's cancer or like some other like life experience, like hearing someone else's story helps you to resonate and say like, okay, like I'm not alone, or there's someone else that has seen something similar. That same effect happens in business when you're just like, this person was a business coach and they started off, they were in debt. They were trying to struggle to make ends meet, but they were able to build up their business to a certain level. I resonate with that. That's what I want to do. And so I want to go after it and work with somebody who really has an understanding of it. Like that's the goal of your story. I always say that the goal of your story is not to just like go and talk about yourself and say how great you are, but it's to be of service to other people. And so if you can think about your story being of service to other people, then it's going to be one of your biggest assets in your business.
That that right there, that was gold. I hope you all heard that right there. That was gold. I do want to ask you one more question.
Mhm.
So I was going through, she has a podcast, guys. Very valuable podcast. I was listening to, I think it was your most recent episode, and one of the tips you gave were you were talking about how we need to talk to our audience. Like we need to speak to our audience. But like a lot of people speak too broadly and they end
Mhm.
up literally not reaching anyone because they're not specific enough to talk to the right people. Do you have any tips, or can you elaborate a little bit on that before we close out this episode?
Yeah, no, that was in episode 23 of the Marketing That Works podcast. And I had this whole idea just because like in my years of experience, I actually worked initially in the concrete industry. And like, you know, that's
Concrete?
it's a whole other pivot. It's a whole other story. But
That's
that was part of my life experience of working in there. And
cool.
so I like to equate it to, how I would sell a book about concrete to a professor of engineering, a civil engineer, would be different than how I would sell another concrete product to, say, like the contractor who's actually going to be like boots on the ground. Like they are both working with concrete, but in completely separate ways. And so
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times, like we have the same thoughts. It's just like, okay, I'm talking about this one thing, but there are completely different people who are approaching and have a desire for this, but in completely different ways. And so if you're super broad, then your people aren't clear if it is for them or not. They don't know
Yeah.
if their exact specific needs are going to be met. They'll say, like, well, this might be it. This could be helpful potentially, because you're starting to say a lot of like the right keywords, but people want to know if this is for me. Like
Yeah.
that's really like where a lot of people have like, is this for me calls? Because people want to know, like, okay, cool. Like this is great for people that, have kids under 5 years old, but like I have a newborn. Is this going to be for me? I was like, well, on one hand, you're just like, well, I said for kids under 5 years old, but like they want to know, like, is this going to be good if I have a newborn? Is this going to be good if I have this situation? People want to know if this is going to be for them. So your content needs to go through that same lens and framing of, will somebody be able to say, oh yeah, this is absolutely designed for me?
You're brilliant. Did you know that? Just
Thank
very brilliant. I love the way that you just,
you.
yeah, girl. I love the way that this just makes sense. And it also like, it makes it doable. Like we can apply all of this to whatever we have going on, whether it be our business, if we're coaches, or if we're like ministries or churches, whatever it is, you guys, this is valuable information. So I do want you all to connect with Danielle. Danielle, can you tell us how can they connect?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is danielle.r.harris. You can also sign up to get on my email list where I go into detail and break down all of these different concepts that I'm talking about here. But a really easy way to get more into my world and just like hear me explain different content, ideas and theories is going to my podcast, Marketing That Works. And you can find that wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And yeah, it comes out weekly. So listen up and subscribe.
Yes, please do that. Because I definitely found it and I loved it. I'm gonna have I'm gonna have all of those links below this video in the description. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Danielle, for just coming and spitting that knowledge on us and help and being helpful. Like you're just so
Oh,
helpful. Thank you.
thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.